In just minutes, one of British television's most beloved morning hosts would reduce comedy legend Ricky Gervais to a state of barely contained fury, setting off a chain reaction that would see the comedian storm off set in disgust. What began as light-hearted banter about his latest Netflix special quickly descended into a vicious character assassination that left studio audiences gasping and social media exploding with outrage. The tension was palpable from the moment Gervais settled into the bright orange sofa opposite Lorraine Kelly's desk. Her smile seemed forced, almost predatory, as she shuffled through her notes with an unusual intensity. Something was different about today's show. There was an edge to Kelly's demeanor that seasoned viewers had rarely witnessed before. "Ricky, lovely to have you back," Kelly began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Though, I have to say, your recent comments about celebrity culture have been quite something." Gervais raised an eyebrow, his trademark smirk faltering slightly. "Well, that's what I do, Lorraine. I tell the truth. Some people find it uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable?" Kelly leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Or just needlessly cruel? Because watching your Golden Globes hosting clips, I couldn't help but wonder, where does honesty end and bullying begin?" The comedian's expression hardened. This wasn't the gentle ribbing he'd expected from morning television's sweetheart. "I'm sorry. Are we really going to do this? On your show?" Kelly's smile grew wider, more calculated. "Do what, Ricky? Have an honest conversation? Isn't that what you're always preaching about?" "There's honest conversation, and then there's whatever this is," Gervais replied, gesturing vaguely at the hostile atmosphere building between them. "You've clearly got something you want to say, so why don't you just say it?" "Fine." Kelly's mask slipped entirely now, revealing something cold and vindictive underneath. "I think you've built an entire career on punching down at people who can't fight back. Celebrities, sure, but also ordinary people who just happen to believe in things you find ridiculous." The audience fell silent. This was not the warm, supportive environment they'd come to expect from Kelly's morning show. Gervais shifted in his seat, clearly taken aback by the sudden aggression. "Punching down?" His voice rose slightly. "I go after millionaire actors and corrupt institutions. How is that punching down?" "Because you don't just go after their actions, do you?" Kelly pressed on, consulting her notes with theatrical precision. "You mock their appearances, their personal struggles, their mental health issues. You turned Mel Gibson's alcoholism into a punchline. You've made jokes about celebrity suicide attempts." "That's not," Gervais began, but Kelly cut him off with a raised hand. "I'm not finished." Her voice had taken on a prosecutorial tone that sent chills through the studio. "And it's not just celebrities, is it? Your stand-up routines are filled with jokes about transgender people, disabled individuals, religious minorities. You hide behind this facade of just telling it like it is, but really, you're just another middle-aged man punching down at the vulnerable." The color drained from Gervais's face. This was character assassination, pure and simple, broadcast live to millions of viewers. "You're taking things completely out of context, Lorraine. My comedy has always been about challenging." "Challenging what? People's right to exist? Their right to feel safe?" Kelly's voice rose to match his, her Scottish accent becoming more pronounced with anger. "You've made a fortune from cruelty, and you've convinced yourself it's some noble, truth-telling mission." Gervais stood up abruptly, his hands clenched at his sides. "Right. I'm not sitting here and listening to this bollocks. You've clearly decided what you think of me before I even walk through the door. Sit down, Ricky." Kelly's command was sharp, authoritative. "We're not done here." "Oh yes, we fucking are." The expletive hung in the air like a dropped bomb. Morning television audiences weren't accustomed to hearing such language, and the shock was palpable throughout the studio. Kelly's eyes lit up with satisfaction. She'd gotten under his skin, exactly as she'd planned. There it is. The real Ricky Gervais, not the thoughtful comedian, not the animal rights activist, just an angry man who can't handle criticism. Criticism. Gervais laughed bitterly. "This isn't criticism. This is a fucking ambush. You invited me here under false pretenses to tear me down on live television. I invited you here to hold you accountable." Kelly shot back, her voice rising to match his intensity. "Something that clearly doesn't happen very often in your bubble of yes men and Netflix executives." The production team was frantically signaling from behind the cameras, But Kelly ignored them completely. This was her show, her moment, and she wasn't backing down. Accountable for what exactly? Gervais demanded, his voice echoing through the studio. For making jokes? For having opinions? For not falling in line with whatever self-righteous crusade you're on? For using your platform to spread hate? Kelly replied without hesitation. For normalizing cruelty. For making vulnerable people feel even more vulnerable. Jesus Christ, Lorraine. When did you become the morality police? Gervais ran his hands through his hair, clearly struggling to maintain composure. You sit here every morning grinning at the camera, pretending everything's wonderful. And now you want to lecture me about authenticity? Kelly's face flushed red with anger. At least I don't make my living mocking people's pain. And I don't make mine pretending to care about people I've never met. Gervais fired back. Your whole career is built on fake sympathy and manufactured outrage. The studio audience was completely silent now, watching in stunned fascination as two of British television's biggest personalities tore each other apart on live television. This was unprecedented territory for morning television. Kelly stood up from behind her desk, her hands trembling with rage. How dare you question my sincerity? I've spent decades supporting charities, raising awareness for important causes. For the cameras, Gervais interrupted savagely. Everything you do is for the cameras. At least I'm honest about being a bastard. But even as the words left his mouth, Gervais could sense that Kelly had more ammunition waiting. And whatever was coming next would make this exchange look like friendly banter. Kelly's smile returned. But it was different now, colder, more calculating. She reached into her folder and pulled out what appeared to be printed screenshots, laying them on her desk with deliberate ceremony. Since we're being honest, Ricky, let's talk about your Twitter activity from last month. Her voice had dropped to an almost whisper, which somehow made it more menacing than her earlier shouting. The tweets you deleted. The ones you thought no one would remember. Gervais froze. His confident smirk vanished entirely, replaced by something approaching panic. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Kelly held up the first screenshot, angling it toward the camera. The one where you called a grieving mother attention-seeking for talking about her son's suicide. Or perhaps the charming comment about how certain cancer patients deserve what they get for their lifestyle choices. The audience gasped audibly. Several people could be heard whispering in shock. This was beyond anything they'd expected to witness on morning television. Those were taken completely out of context, Gervais said. But his voice had lost all its earlier fire. You're twisting everything. Am I? Kelly's eyes gleamed with predatory satisfaction. Let me read this one verbatim then, shall we? She cleared her throat dramatically. Quote, some people die young because they're too stupid to live. Natural selection in action. Stop crying about it and move on. That wasn't about, Gervais started. But Kelly steamrolled over him. Oh, but there's more. She shuffled to another screenshot. Your delightful commentary on a young woman's appearance at a charity event. If you're going to represent a cause, at least try not to look like the problem. This was a cancer survivor, Ricky. A 23-year-old girl who'd lost her hair to chemotherapy. The studio had gone completely silent except for the hum of cameras. Even the production crew had stopped their frantic gesturing, transfixed by the carnage unfolding before them. Gervais's face had gone ashen. You're cherry-picking tweets from years ago, taking them completely out of years ago? Kelly's voice rose triumphantly. These are from 3 weeks ago, Ricky. 3 weeks. She slammed the papers down on her desk. You posted these, realized how vile they were, and then deleted them hoping no one would notice. This is a fucking witch hunt, Gervais snarled. But there was desperation in his voice now. You've been stalking my social media looking for anything you can use against me. I've been doing my job, Kelly shot back. Which is more than I can say for the so-called journalists who usually interview you. They just let you spout your bile without challenge because they're too starstruck or too cowardly to call you out. The comedian began pacing behind the sofa, running his hands through his hair. You planned this whole thing, didn't you? This was never about my Netflix special. Oh, it absolutely was. Kelly's voice dripped with venom. Your special, where you spent 20 minutes mocking trans teenagers. Where you called autism fashionable and suggested most diagnoses are fake. Where you literally said that some rape victims are asking for it with their behavior. I never said that, Gervais exploded, spinning around to face her. You're lying on live fucking television. Am I? Kelly reached for her laptop, turning the screen toward the camera. Shall we roll the clip? Because I have it right here, ready to go. For the first time since the confrontation began, Gervais looked genuinely frightened. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Kelly's finger hovered over the play button. I'm sure your Netflix lawyers would love to see their golden boy's real thoughts broadcast to my morning audience. The threat hung in the air like a loaded gun. Gervais stood frozen, clearly calculating his options. The confident, quick-witted comedian who dominated award shows and talk shows for decades was crumbling before millions of viewers. You're destroying my career over comedy, he said quietly, the fight seeming to drain out of him momentarily. No, Ricky. Kelly's voice was steady, implacable. You destroyed your own career the moment you decided that cruelty was more important than decency. I'm just making sure people see who you really are. But then something shifted in Gervais's expression. The fear was replaced by cold fury, and when he spoke again, his voice was dangerously low. You sanctimonious bitch! You think you're some kind of moral authority? Let's talk about your dirty laundry, shall we? Kelly's confidence wavered for just a moment. What are you talking about? The Hartley Foundation scandal. Gervais's smile was razor-sharp now. Your precious charity work. How much of that donation money actually made it to the sick kids, Lorraine? The color drained from Kelly's face. That was investigated and cleared, was it? Or was it just swept under the rug by your media friends? Gervais was advancing on her now, sensing blood in the water. Because I've got some very interesting financial documents that suggest otherwise. Kelly's hands were shaking as she gripped her desk. You're bluffing. Am I? Gervais pulled out his phone, waving it like a weapon. One phone call to the Guardian, and your perfect little reputation is finished. Shall we see who falls harder? The studio had become a pressure cooker of tension. Two careers were teetering on the edge of destruction, and neither combatant was showing any sign of backing down. But Kelly wasn't finished yet, and what she said next would push Gervais beyond the point of no return. Kelly's eyes narrowed to slits as she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper that somehow carried throughout the entire studio. You want to play dirty, Ricky? Fine. Let's talk about what really happened at the Ivy last month. With that waitress, the one who was too frightened to go to the press. The blood drained from Gervais's face so quickly that several audience members audibly gasped. His phone clattered to the floor as his hands began to shake uncontrollably. You wouldn't fucking dare, he whispered. But there was no conviction in his voice anymore. She was 19 years old, Ricky. 19. Kelly's voice grew stronger with each word, feeding off his obvious terror. Working her way through university, and you thought your celebrity status meant you could treat her like your personal property. That's a lie, Gervais screamed, his composure completely shattered. That's a fucking lie, and you know it. Is it? Kelly reached into her folder again, this time pulling out what appeared to be legal documents. Because I have her statement right here. Signed and witnessed. She was too scared to press charges. But she wasn't too scared to tell the truth. The audience was transfixed by the horror unfolding before them. This had gone far beyond entertainment into something darker, more primal. Two people were destroying each other on live television, and nobody could look away. You're fabricating evidence. Gervais lunged toward Kelly's desk, but she stood her ground, holding the papers just out of his reach. Am I? Then why are you so terrified right now? Why aren't you denying it with your usual arrogant confidence? Kelly's voice was steel wrapped in silk. Could it be because you know exactly what you did to that poor girl? Gervais stumbled backward, his breathing becoming labored and desperate. This is extortion. This is fucking extortion on live television. No, Ricky, this is accountability. Something you've managed to avoid your entire career. Kelly's satisfaction was palpable now. You've spent decades hiding behind your comedy, pretending your cruelty was just jokes. But some things aren't funny. Some things are just evil. I'm calling my lawyer. Gervais fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he could barely operate it. I'm suing you into the fucking ground for this. Good luck with that. Kelly's laugh was cold and merciless. Truth is an absolute defense against libel, and we both know this is the truth, don't we? The production team had completely given up trying to control the situation. Cameras kept rolling, as the biggest television disaster in recent memory played out in real time. Social media was already exploding with clips and commentary, but nobody in the studio was thinking about ratings anymore. "You've destroyed me," Gervais said quietly, the fight finally going out of him. "You've actually fucking destroyed me. You destroyed yourself the moment you thought your fame made you untouchable." Kelly's voice was implacable, showing no mercy for his obvious distress. "I just made sure everyone could see what was already there." Gervais looked around the studio wildly, taking in the horrified faces of the audience, the shocked expressions of the crew, the relentless red lights of the cameras broadcasting his humiliation to millions. For a moment, he seemed to consider saying something else, but then his shoulders sagged in defeat. "Fuck this. Fuck all of this." He ripped off his microphone, the feedback screeching through the studio speakers. "And fuck you, Lorraine. I hope you're happy." "Deliriously," Kelly replied without missing a beat. Gervais turned toward the exit, but Kelly wasn't quite finished with him yet. "Oh, and Ricky? That Netflix special of yours? I'd be very surprised if it sees the light of day after this." He froze mid-step, his back still turned to her. "What the fuck does that mean?" "It means I've already sent copies of that statement to Netflix executives, along with the deleted tweets and several other interesting documents." Kelly's smile was triumphant now. "They're having an emergency meeting about your contract as we speak." The final blow landed like a physical punch. Gervais spun around one last time, his face twisted with rage and desperation. "You vindictive fucking bitch! You've ruined everything!" "No, Ricky. You ruined everything. I just made sure there were consequences." For a moment, it looked like Gervais might charge at her, might physically attack her on live television. The tension in the studio was unbearable, with everyone holding their breath, waiting to see if verbal warfare would become actual violence. But instead, Gervais let out a sound that was part scream, part sob, and part roar of pure fury. "I'm done! I'm fucking done with all of you!" He stormed toward the exit, shoving past startled crew members and knocking over a camera in his wake. Just before he reached the door, he turned back one final time, his face red with tears and rage. "This isn't over, Lorraine. This isn't fucking over." "Yes, it is," Kelly replied calmly, settling back into her chair as if nothing had happened. "It's very much over." The studio door slammed with such force that it echoed throughout the building. Gervais was gone, leaving behind a stunned silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Kelly straightened her papers, smoothed down her hair, and looked directly into the camera with a serene smile. "Well?" she said, her voice returning to its usual warm tones, as if the previous half hour of carnage had never happened. "That was certainly illuminating. When we return after the break, we'll be discussing sustainable gardening tips with celebrity chef Jamie Oliver." As the cameras finally stopped rolling and the studio lights dimmed, the audience sat in shocked silence, still processing what they'd just witnessed. 2 careers had entered that studio, but only one was walking away intact. Lorraine Kelly had not just won the confrontation, she had obliterated her opponent so completely that there might be no coming back from it. In just 47 minutes of live television, one of Britain's most controversial comedians had been stripped bare, exposed, and left with nothing but the wreckage of his reputation. And through it all, Lorraine Kelly had smiled her perfect television smile, proving that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who look the most harmless.